Watch closely, because this is how countries die. Not in explosions or nuclear war, but through slow failure, corruption, climate, incompetence, civil war, and eventually silence. Advanced AI systems processing vast amounts of intelligence data, strategic forecast, and expert analysis from defense analysts worldwide have identified 7 countries facing potential collapse by next year. Not decades from now, not in a far-off dystopia, but 2026. Russia, China, North Korea, Iran, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Venezuela. These aren't just struggling nations, they're powder kegs, each with its own trigger: a failed war, a broken economy, a brutal dictatorship, a climate catastrophe. In this video, we'll walk through how each one could fall and why no one is ready for what happens next. This isn't fiction, it's the future, based on real-world data, real geopolitical pressure points, and predictive modeling that doesn't lie. The world map might look very different in 12 months. Welcome to the age of collapsing nations. But before we begin, the patterns reveal something chilling. One of these countries will lose control of its nuclear arsenal. Another will start a war that destroys its own regime. A third will simply stop existing as a functioning state. The data won't tell us which is which, but the trajectories are clear. Let's start with the most immediate nuclear threat. Something's happening in North Korea, and it's making intelligence agencies nervous. Late 2025 brought reports of unusual activity at nuclear sites across the Hermit Kingdom. Construction, movement, signals, intelligence picking up chatter that doesn't match normal patterns. Then, in August, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un made a public statement that sent shockwaves through Seoul and Washington. The security environment requires North Korea to rapidly expand its nuclear armament. He said something else, too. It is a fait accompli that a war can break out at any time on the Korean peninsula. Not could, can. That's not posturing, that's a threat. By September, Western intelligence confirmed a secret missile base near the northern border with China, just 17 miles from the frontier. Satellite imagery shows the Sinpungdong facility can store up to 9 nuclear-capable intercontinental ballistic missiles, along with their mobile launchers. The Federation of American Scientists estimates North Korea has produced enough fissile material for up to 90 nuclear warheads. They've likely assembled around 50. But here's what analysts noticed that most experts missed. It's not just about the nukes, it's about what happens when the man controlling them disappears. Kim Jong-un is in his early 40s with persistent health issues, weight fluctuations, prolonged absences, cardiovascular concerns. His father died suddenly of a heart attack at 69, his grandfather at 82. Heart problems run in the family. And if Kim dies tomorrow, there's no clear successor. His children are minors. His sister, Kim Yo-young, wields significant power, but it's unclear if the military would accept her leadership. The analysis shows 2 pathways to collapse. Neither is survivable for the regime. First, Kim launches a provocation that spirals beyond his control. Maybe a tactical nuclear test, maybe an attack on a South Korean target. But this time, with his expanded arsenal, he miscalculates the response. South Korea's defense ministry has been explicit. If North Korea ever uses nuclear weapons, the Kim Jong-un regime will face its end. A full-scale war would be catastrophic, but the North Korean military cannot match the combined might of the US and South Korea. Within days, Kim's regime would be obliterated. The second pathway is quieter but equally chaotic: Kim's sudden death. No designated heir, no transition plan, competing factions scrambling for control. Purges have made the top brass paranoid. Kim executed his own uncle and half-brother. Trust is non-existent. If the regime fractures, the Hermit Kingdom doesn't open gradually, it shatters. Masses fleeing towards China and South Korea, nuclear materials unaccounted for, regional powers scrambling for secure weapons before they fall into the wrong hands. What does this mean for you? If North Korea collapses chaotically, expect immediate global market volatility. South Korea, home to Samsung, Hyundai, LG, could see production disrupted for months. Your next phone, Your next car could cost significantly more. And the refugee crisis? China and South Korea would face millions of desperate people crossing borders, destabilizing the entire region. But North Korea isn't the only nuclear powder keg on the verge of detonation. There's another regime where the countdown has already begun, and the clock is ticking faster than anyone realizes. Tehran, 2025. Protests flare up almost weekly. Women burning hijabs. Students chanting in the streets. Security forces responding with tear gas, beatings, arrests. The Woman Life Freedom Uprising in 2022 showed the regime something terrifying. People aren't afraid anymore. Its analysts didn't focus on street protests when calculating Iran's collapse probability. They focused on uranium, specifically enrichment levels at Iranian nuclear facilities, crossing red lines week after week, grams becoming kilograms, low enriched uranium becoming high enriched, slowly approaching weapons grade. Israel has been watching every centrifuge spin. U.S. intelligence tracking every shipment, every technical advancement, every threshold crossed. And in mid-2025, renowned economist Nouriel Roubini made a prediction that captured what intelligence agencies had been quietly discussing for months: regime collapse in Iran following the U.S. bombardment of the country's nuclear facilities was likely in the near future. Not possible, likely. Strategic analysts calculated something even more specific. There's a 12-day window. 12 days between when Israel decides Iran has crossed the final red line and when the Islamic Republic ceases to exist as a centralized state. Here's how it unfolds. Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps, the elite force meant to hold everything together, has been Israel's primary target for years. IRGC commanders assassinated in Damascus. IRGC facilities bombed in Syria. Intelligence operations penetrating deep into Tehran. By 2025, Israel analysts were writing that Iran was teetering on the brink of collapse. Internal power struggles, economic catastrophe, popular discontent reaching critical mass. The regime's aura of invincibility built over 47 years was cracking. But the regime still had its nuclear program, the one thing that commanded respect, fear, international attention. And then projections show in 2026, Iran enriches uranium to weapons grade and begins preparing for a possible nuclear test. Israel cannot allow it. The United States cannot allow it. So they launch what intelligence circles are calling the 12-day war. Massive airstrikes across Iran, B-2s, F-35s, and F-15s hitting nuclear enrichment facilities at Natanz and Fordow. Cruise missiles and bunker busters targeting IRGC bases. Intelligence operations sabotaging command structures. Within 72 hours, Iran's nuclear program is crippled. IRGC infrastructure is decimated. The supreme leader's authority, built on strength and divine mandate, is shattered by military humiliation. And that's when the real cascade begins. Day 13. Mass protests explode across Tehran, Mashhad, Isfahan, Tabriz. Not thousands, millions. The people sense weakness like blood in the water. Elements of Iran's own security forces begin to fracture. Some units join the protesters, others flee. Still others hunker down in their barracks, waiting to see who wins. Within 2 weeks, the 47-year-old Islamic Republic is in free fall. Israeli intelligence warned that the downfall could lead to internal power struggles or even civil war between rival factions. Reformist, monarchist, ethnic separatist, and hardline Islamist militias all scramble for power in the vacuum. For global energy markets, Iran's collapse means immediate chaos. Iran produces about 3 million barrels of oil per day. Remove that from global supply during a civil war, and oil prices could spike 40 to 50%. Your gas prices? Expect them to double within weeks. 2 nuclear flashpoints, both teetering on the edge. But if you think regional powers collapsing is the worst-case scenario, you haven't seen what's happening to the superpower everyone thought was invincible. Something strange started happening in Russian cities in late 2024. Obituaries, lots of them. Local newspapers in small Siberian towns in the Far East, in rural regions, filled with death notices. Young men, 20-somethings, 30s, entire generations disappearing into the war machine. By 2025, you couldn't hide it anymore. In September, the BBC Russian service, working with Mediazona and volunteers, confirmed the deaths of 128,115 Russian soldiers by name. Between June and August alone, they recorded 23,305 new death notices, up to 420 per day, nearly triple the 2024 average. Ukrainian intelligence released official Russian military loss statistics for just the first 8 months of 2025. 281,550 personnel lost. By October, total Russian casualties since February 2022 had surpassed 1.1 million. More Russian soldiers have died in 3.5 years in Ukraine than in Afghanistan, Chechnya, and every other conflict since 1945 combined. But battlefield losses tell only part of the story. What analysts discovered goes deeper. By 2025, local governments across Russia were cutting civil servant salaries by 30 to 50%. Some cities couldn't afford to keep streetlights on. Hidden beneath official budgets, $9 trillion in local government debt, more than the combined GDP of Japan and Germany. Local government financing vehicles started defaulting in 2023. By 2025, it was happening regularly. The Russian state was quietly hemorrhaging at the municipal level. But here's a third dimension that terrifies strategists even more. Russia isn't one nation. It's 21 autonomous republics, each with its own ethnic identity, language, and historical grievances. Dagestan, Chechnya, Tatarstan, Bashkortostan, Buryatia, Tuvia. And the casualty analysis revealed something explosive. Ethnic minorities from these regions were dying at disproportionately high rates. Buryats, Tuvans, Chechens, recruited heavily, paid well by local standards, sent to the front lines, and killed in massive numbers. What happens when those regions realize they're being used as cannon fodder for Moscow's war? In 2026, a catastrophic military defeat. Not just a tactical setback, a humiliating regime-threatening collapse on the battlefield. Competing factions in Moscow turn on each other. The military blames the intelligence services. The intelligence services blame the National Guard. Wagner-style militias operate independently, loyal to commanders, not to the Kremlin. Violence becomes real, armed clashes, purges and counter-purges. And in that chaos, the ethnic republics see their moment. Not gradual succession, simultaneous declarations of sovereignty across a dozen regions. Russia doesn't fracture into 2 or 3 pieces, it shatters into dozens. Analysts grimly call this the sick man of Eurasia scenario, a nuclear-armed state fragmenting in real time with 5,500 nuclear warheads scattered across a collapsing empire. One strategic forecast warned that if Putin's war enters its 5th year in 2027, Russia's personnel vulnerability will go from critical to breakdown, driving Russia toward leadership-driven collapse. For the global economy, Russia's collapse means immediate disruption to fertilizer supplies, 13% of global production, grain exports, and natural gas to Europe. Wheat prices could surge 60 to 80%, making bread, pasta, and basic staples significantly more expensive worldwide. 3 nuclear powers on the brink, but nuclear weapons aren't the only existential threat facing humanity. There's something else brewing in South Asia, a perfect storm where climate, chaos, and instability converge. 2022. Unprecedented floods submerge a third of Pakistan. Over 1,700 people died, 33 million affected. Once-in-a-century disaster. 2025, it happened again. Since June 2025, Pakistan has faced devastating monsoon floods that claimed nearly 1,000 lives, displaced over 2.5 million people, destroyed more than 8,400 houses, and submerged 2.2 million hectares of cropland. Wheat flour prices jumped 25% in the first week of September. The World Bank issued a stark warning. Climate shocks are the single biggest threat to Pakistan's macroeconomic stability. But trend analysis didn't predict another flood would destroy Pakistan. It predicted what comes after. The country contributes less than 1% of global greenhouse emissions, yet a 2025 global assessment found Pakistan more vulnerable to climate change than any other nation. But climate alone doesn't collapse countries. Pakistan ranks 144th out of 163 countries on the Global Peace Index, second in the world on the Global Terrorism Index. The Pakistani Taliban, TTP, has been growing stronger. Balak separatists launching attacks, sectarian militias everywhere. The state's authority barely extends beyond major cities. The convergence is clear. Climate catastrophe plus state failure plus extremism equals systemic collapse. Here's the sequence. Mid-2026, severe drought follows the 2025 floods. Crops fail, livestock die. Water sources dry up. Famine hits remote provinces, Balochistan, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, rural Sindh. The government, paralyzed by dead and infighting, fails to organize adequate food distribution. Food riots explode in Karachi, Lahore, Islamabad. Police firing into crowds, chaos spreading. But in rural areas, something different happens. The Pakistani Taliban and militant groups step in, providing food aid, offering protection, filling the vacuum left by a collapsing state. District by district, government authority evaporates. By late 2026, Islamabad's writ doesn't extend beyond the capital. The military splits into factions or stages a coup but cannot stabilize the country. Multiple simultaneous insurgencies, Balak separatists, Taliban-aligned militants, sectarian violence. And here's what makes Pakistan's collapse a global crisis. Pakistan has nuclear weapons, an estimated 170-plus warheads. In a fragmenting state where multiple armed groups are fighting for control and no one knows who's in charge of the arsenal. For you, this means potential nuclear terrorism becomes a realistic threat for the first time since the Cold War. Insurance costs for major cities worldwide would skyrocket. International travel would face unprecedented security measures. 3 nuclear powers are crumbling. There's a 4th crisis unfolding, one so quiet the world has already stopped watching. August 2021. The world watched Afghanistan fall. Every news channel, every headline, desperate scenes at Kabul airport. August 2025. The world stopped watching. But the data collection didn't stop, and what it revealed is worse than war. 29 million Afghans need humanitarian aid. Over 2/3 of the population, with 15 million facing acute food insecurity. Afghanistan has endured its 3rd consecutive year of drought, crops decimated, livestock dying, wells running dry. The Taliban regime cannot feed its people. A UN official made a blunt assessment. The Taliban depend on the UN and they know it. They can't feed the population. Only 2% of the population is getting enough to eat. At least 1 in 3 children is malnourished. The head of the World Food Program in Kabul warned we're on the brink of catastrophe. But there's no dramatic rescue coming. Foreign aid is dwindling. Donor fatigue, Taliban restrictions on women working for NGOs, international priorities shifting elsewhere. Afghanistan is starving in silence. Winter 2025-26, the harshest yet. Food supplies run out in remote provinces. By spring 2026, tens of thousands are dead from hunger and disease. Not soldiers, not militants, families, children, the elderly. Communities rebel for survival. In the north, former Northern Alliance fighters take up arms again. The Islamic State Khorasan launches attacks on Taliban positions, recruiting from desperate villages. Provincial Taliban commanders start acting independently, making deals with local warlords just to secure food. Afghanistan doesn't become a failed state, it becomes a collection of starving fiefdoms. Millions try to flee toward Pakistan, which is already collapsing, toward Iran, emerging from war, toward Central Asia, which closes its borders. For the global heroin trade, Afghanistan's collapse means chaos. The country produces 80% of the world's opium. Complete state failure means no regulation. Drug cartels would have direct access to poppy fields, potentially flooding Western cities with cheap heroin. Afghanistan won't collapse from bombs. It'll collapse from silence, from the world looking away while an entire nation starves. 4 crises, all accelerating. but none compared to what happens if the world's most populous nation miscalculates just once. Beijing 2025, gleaming skyscrapers, military parades, shows of force in the Taiwan Strait. To the world, China looks unstoppable, but analysts see cracks spreading beneath the surface. Economic growth slowing under crushing debt, demographic catastrophe, aging population, collapsing birth rates, real estate bubble imploding, erasing trillions in middle-class wealth. Youth unemployment got so bad that China stopped publishing the numbers in mid-2023. When they resumed with a new methodology, the rate had somehow dropped from 21.3% to 14.9%. But economic problems alone don't collapse superpowers. The real trigger is Taiwan. U.S. intelligence assessment. Xi Jinping has directed the People's Liberation Army to be prepared for a potential invasion of Taiwan by 2027. Admiral Samuel Paparo testified before Congress, China's drills around Taiwan are not just exercises, they are rehearsals. By 2024, Chinese military activity near Taiwan had increased 300%. New roll-on, roll-off ferries built that can transform into military transport, amphibious assault training, stockpiling of military supplies in coastal provinces. Everything pointing to one conclusion: invasion window 2026-2027. But what if Taiwan doesn't fall in days like Xi expects? China's military has never fought a modern war. The PLA's last major combat was the 1979 invasion of Vietnam, which went poorly. Chinese officers suffer from the five incapables: critiques that they cannot judge situations, understand authorities' intentions, make operational decisions, deploy troops, or handle unexpected situations. Mock battles, parades, exercises, but no combat. One Chinese dissident warned, there is neither the possibility nor the mechanism for gradual transformation, and collapse is therefore its destiny. When crisis hits, it hits hard. Here's the scenario. 2026. China launches its invasion, expecting swift victory, 72 hours maximum. Instead, fierce resistance. U.S. and allied forces intervene with overwhelming force. Japanese bases launch aircraft. South Korea allows airspace use. The Seventh Fleet engages. The invasion bogs down, landing craft destroyed, air superiority contested, tens of thousands of PLA soldiers dead within a week. Humiliating military defeat. The Chinese Communist Party's aura of infallibility, built over 75 years, shatters. Economic woes become unbearable. Factories close, markets crater, banks freeze accounts. Mass protest across Shanghai, Beijing, Guangzhou, Chengdu. But Xi's system has no safety valve, no way to let off pressure, no parliament, no independent judiciary, no free press. Just repression or capitulation. If repression fails, the whole system collapses at once. Factions turn on Xi. Military units receive conflicting orders. Regional commanders act independently. If a crisis hits this system, it hits hard. There is no gradual decline, only abrupt upheaval. China, with 1.4 billion people, descends into internal conflict. For you, this means your iPhone might not get manufactured. Medications, 80% of active pharmaceutical ingredients come from China, might become unavailable. Rare earth minerals essential for electric cars and military equipment would vanish. The global economy would plunge into depression that makes 2008 look minor. 6 nations teetering, but there's one more, one that's been dying so long people forgot it was still breathing. Venezuela's economy has shrunk 80% since 2014. More than 7.7 million people have fled, over 20% of the population. Nicolás Maduro clings to power through military loyalty, repression, and support from Russia, China, Cuba, and Iran. The 2024 presidential election was so blatantly rigged that even Venezuela's neighbors condemned it. Oil revenue remains vulnerable. The military, once paid in dollars, now receives wages in worthless bolivars. How many more months can this last? 2026. Oil prices fall or sanctions tighten. The government can no longer pay security forces. Massive demonstrations erupt, the largest since 2019. A military faction revolts. Mid-level officers, tired of watching families starve while Maduro's circle lives in luxury, launches a coup. clashes in Caracas, loyalists versus rebel forces. Russia and China, watching from afar, decide intervention isn't worth it. Within weeks, Maduro flees or is arrested. Jubilant Venezuelans celebrate the end of 2 decades of socialist rule. But challenges are enormous. Malnourished population, crumbled infrastructure. The oil industry needs billions just to restart. Analysts assert that Maduro's end is near. The confluence of internal collapse and external pressure will force change by 2026. For the United States, Venezuela's collapse means one consequence: a massive refugee surge. Experts estimate 2 to 3 million more Venezuelans could flee in the first 6 months, heading through Central America toward the U.S. southern border. 7 countries on 7 different paths to collapse: North Korea, nuclear gamble; Iran, regional war; Russia, slow fragmentation; Pakistan, climate catastrophe; Afghanistan, silent starvation; China, superpower miscalculation; Venezuela, authoritarian implosion. These aren't wild predictions. They're extrapolations from intelligence assessments, military analyses, economic indicators, climate models. War, climate, tyranny, economic failure. None of these regimes are reforming fast enough. History teaches us that empires collapse suddenly after one shock too many. We're watching those shocks accumulate in real time. Billions of lives affected, nuclear security threatened, global economy disrupted, refugee crises on unprecedented scales, supply chains shattered, food prices spiking. The world map could be redrawn by the end of 2026. Can any of these regimes change course? Or are we just waiting for the first domino to fall? Which country do you think goes down first? North Korea's nuclear gamble? Russia's slow death? China's Taiwan disaster? Pakistan's climate catastrophe? Let us know in the comments. And subscribe to Fall of Nations, because if 2026 becomes the year of collapsing nations, you'll want to understand exactly how we got here. The age of stable empires is over. Welcome to the age of volatility. The map is already changing. We just haven't redrawn it yet.